Jimmy Mbogo, KTN News.
Well, Ken, hata Kenya iko na deni na najua tutalipa tu. That is one of the sentiments shared there. But the promise to remove people from CRB in the campaign period and the reality of how you need to get out of CRB, is there a wide gap or is it very, very narrow?
There is a disconnect,
yes,
to your point. But I think it's still a step in the right direction. If you think of the fact that you have about 20 million adults in the labor force and 4.5 of those have been blacklisted, you're talking about 25% of the total labor force in Kenya has been blacklisted. That has to be a record in the world. So I think it's a good move. Yes, maybe it's not exactly what was promised in the campaign, but the fact that there's an attempt, I think it's a good start, but hopefully they should fulfill what they actually promised to Kenyans.
Yes, and of course access to credit remains very critical. Being listed on CRB has been quite a challenge, and the president mentioned this, the issue about blanket ban, which you've been seeing. If your name appears there, you all platforms, you sort of are blacklisted, though they don't like using that term. In terms of the framework of CRB and the punitive measures that you need to take for defaulters who are adamant about paying their loans, is it something that we need to be keen to sort of streamline that framework?
Well, that's a very powerful point, Noah. And indeed, the CRB is a blunt tool in terms of measuring who's a good entrepreneur and who's not. If anything, if you look at the history of entrepreneurship, as Joseph Schumpeter would have put it, an entrepreneur is somebody who pursues risk. So it's a risky entity. 45% of businesses don't get to their 5th birthday. So when you have such punitive actions to the people who take risk, there is that possibility you might now discourage enterprise. Most of the big entrepreneurs, the successful people in Kenya, have had periods of challenges. I think if you look at the Optimum founder, a very successful entity, I think they said his previous 15 ventures didn't work out. So the habit of entrepreneurship is, it takes time. And when you have policies that discourage people because they'll be blacklisted, you sort of start excluding the people who you want. So I think it's something that they need to look at. And that's what the CBK has told banks, that don't just use the CRB alone. In fact, for the Hustler Fund, it would be better if they worked with local community leaders and asked them, in this area of Narok, who are the people who are known to do well in business? That if you put 500,000 shillings in their hands, you can expect to see a car wash here, a fruit parlor here, a restaurant here. And the community will tell you. They'll tell you this is a person, but maybe they did some work with the county government, they were never paid, now they've been blacklisted. So I think the idea to engage the community, tell you who are the real entrepreneurs, as opposed to using a score. A score that could have come because government delayed your payment and you're never able to pay. So I think it's important they have a richer toolkit. And I think that's the message CBK is telling banks, that have a rich toolkit. Because even before CRBs came, banks used to lend.
Yes.
And they used to have the same non-performing loans that they have today. So it's a bit ironical that that hasn't improved.
Yeah, because I was having a chat with Jared Gatenga, CEO of Credit Information Sharing Association of Kenya. And we're talking about the issue about utilization of credit information, because it should be used as a tool, to sort of have your credit history, look your patterns of payment, and even when there is a default, it should be considered on a larger scale based on the data of how you've been taking up loans in the country. Have we been underutilizing our credit information? Because CRB is rich in data, to be honest.
No, you are definitely underutilizing it. If you go to the United States, you'll take, for example, somebody who's been there for 10 years and does not have a credit record. It means that you have a poor credit score because you've never taken any credit product and you won't access anything, even if you've not defaulted. So the CRB should be there to enrich information. Yes, there's negative information, but there should also be positive information that should be able. I think in Kenya it's been a very punitive. It's not been able to be used for product development, for innovation, and I think that's the shift that needs to take.
Okay, definitely. So with 6 minutes to to break. Let's talk matters hustler fund. Yeah, the framework came out between 550,000 shillings. You have an opportunity to borrow there. You've seen people have already started taking advantage of the situation, and trying to con people. So we've been told do not give any information in regards to registration of hustler fund. So be very careful outside there. But from the initial outlook where you sat and you saw, this is what hustler fund is. What came to mind first?
Well, I think it's been at the heart of the bottom-up economic model, really empowering the small-scale trader, the person selling fruits, the kiosk person, and that is where money is most needed to circulate. And the reason we're having a rise in insecurity in Nairobi is you have a lot of those people, they don't have access to making that daily money. So if you're working in a car wash, you're getting your 300, 400 every day, you will not get into crime. And I think that is where the money needs to go. And that's why I say they need to work with the local leaders, the chiefs, the business people, to make sure that it's getting to the rural communities. If you get it to sophisticated people who would otherwise get this credit, what they'll do is they'll borrow that at 9%, put it in an infrastructure bond at 14%, and just get a nice spread in between. But what you want is job creation. You want people to create those small jobs that give people dignity, give people hope in those communities. You go to Mombasa, areas like Kilifi, you find so many households, young men are not able to bring anything back home. So you need to say, how do we put car washes? How do we put kiosks? How do we put chips? These are the things that I think they need to be very, very keen on. Yes. Otherwise, it might go the Wezo Fund way or the Youth Fund way.
I know. What are the risks with this particular fund? Of course, we've spoken about NPLs, might be there.
Right.
What headwinds are you foreseeing that they need to beat?
I think the challenge is the Hustler Fund cannot work in isolation. You need other economic reforms in the economy to be continuing. So we hope that the government is also looking at other reforms, because yes, you might get your 50K, your 500K to start your business, but other challenges come in. Maybe the taxes that you have to pay are so high. Maybe the licensing. To run a small restaurant in Nairobi, you need about 13 licenses. That becomes a problem. So you find even setting up that small restaurant becomes a problem, and now you're unable to repay. So I think they need to say, yes, this is a good way of getting credit into the community, but we also need to make sure regulation is easier. Get that single business permit. Make sure the taxations are not punitive. Otherwise, if you just focus on that hustler fund alone and neglect the other ecosystem, the ease of doing business, you'll end up with businesses that start and they don't see their first birthday.
Yes. Yeah. Was it last Friday we touched on the global recession? A lot of people are predicting that. I mean, IMF, World Bank, right. An impending recession. And now we are in that environment where we are trying to boost credit. Talk to us about credit performance amidst a recession. Is it something that that sort of cushions people in a way? How do businesses perform generally in a recession? And is there a risk of maybe advancing credit, but businesses find it difficult to convert it into more money as businesses should?
Yes, it's absolutely right. When you have a global recession, the challenge is the exports we are selling out there to Europe, to US, the demand there might not be very high because people there are facing inflation, the highest it's been in 4 decades. So people have to start looking at the local markets. Maybe if I'm not exporting everything, can some of my produce be consumed locally? On the flip side also, costs of importation become very expensive because if you don't get the dollars in the economy, the exchange rate might be not in our favor. So importing becomes very expensive. So for a small-scale trader, talk about a carpenter who's making this type of a stool. Maybe a previous corporate like Standard would have bought it from a multinational, but they'll be able to say, why are you importing this furniture when there are really good carpenters out here who can provide? So it's very important that these small businesses position themselves as avenues so that when corporates find it very expensive to import, they'll be like, why? We can actually do some of these things in Kenya locally and we build that production narrative so that even when the global economy gets back to where it is, every corporate is satisfied with the quality it's getting locally, and every CEO is saying, half of our procurement will be done locally. We do not want imported goods. So there's a big opportunity there.
And briefly, in less than a minute, Ken, because KPMG released their CEO survey this week, and 25%, only 25% of East African and I think Central Africa CEOs are prepared for the recession. They've put measures in place. I think, is it 45% or above 50, if I'm not wrong? They're ready to lay off people and get rid of people in case things get difficult. And I mean, what do you make of it with the impending recession?
No, it's very poor strategic planning. When people don't prepare for an economic slowdown, people go often to what I call the lazy techniques of let's just lay off people. But a good CEO who sees that you might have an economic slowdown, you're able to come up with strategic measures. That means you'll still retain the same number of staff. But I think the challenge in Kenya is we don't take strategic planning seriously. So when the recession comes, the natural thing you say, oh, we'll just cut our marketing budget and we lay off people. It's a very lazy thing and it affects a lot of people. A good CEO should be able to say, we see a slowdown in the economy. We can be proactive enough making a few decisions here. So by the time we get there, it's not as painful. But you don't have that type of CEOs very frequently who will look about the future in that proactive way.
Yes. Wow. Thank you, Ken. I mean, when I took a look at your tie, it's a very nice tie. I had an idea. Since I love ties. You see the way there is mental health. Now I want to introduce men tie health. Like to make sure your ties are like wear good ties, like health there. Anyway, it's just in passing. Can it float, especially in this digital era?
I think you're wearing the Wall Street type of tie, so I think you, in the tie game, I think you are playing at the Champions League.
Men tie health. Anyway, thank you, Ken Gishinga, lead economist at Metro Economics, for your input. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And as you always say, don't do anything I wouldn't do, Ken. Very, very difficult. We take a short break right here in business today. We'll return with more. Stay tuned.